out of it. How do we finance this? And it gets us all thinking very deeply. Clearly, it is time for us to start looking at domestic resource mobilization. Yes, we get external assistance, but for Ghana, we woke up one morning and we became a lower middle income country. And that was because our per capita income had changed. And that was good news, but it came also with a need for certain infrastructure. And how do we build that infrastructure so that we can grow in that? Subsequent to that, we entered into an IMF program, which I'm glad to say that the last 3 reviews have been broadly satisfactory. And clearly, there has been macroeconomic stabilization. And this gives us the foundation to be able to grow and to develop. So how do we finance this? And I came up with a few suggestions, and of course, all of you will add to it on the ways that we can do some of this financing. At the end of the day, that's what we need. The development partners will help us up to a point, and we need to take it from there. And that's why domestic resource mobilization is important. So, financing infrastructure and development. A new law was passed, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, to set up that fund. That fund gets money from the petroleum revenues that we have, and I heard one of the panelists talk about Norway, which has done a lot of their development based on their petroleum funds or revenues. So we have that, and then we also intend to fund it again through 2.5% coming out of the VAT. I'm sure you all remember when the VAT moved from 15% to 17.5%. That 2.5% goes into the Ghana Investment Infrastructure Fund as well to assist with capital budgeting. Again, we have the export-led growth, which we are pursuing. It will require trade finance, guarantees, and so forth. So once again, an institution has been set up, the Exim Bank. We are yet to appoint the directors for this bank, but this bank collapses 3 institutions into one. So the IDIAF, Exim Guarantee, and a third one that I forget right now. But then we get the Exim Bank, which will help to promote our export-led strategy. Again, another source of funding would be from the capital markets, and I'm glad to see Mr. Dimensa here on the panel. So the capital markets is going to be an important part of doing that. Government set up the Ghana fixed income market. This was to enhance secondary trading of fixed assets, which is so important because the primary market is not enough. There has to be a secondary market to take it a notch higher. We also set up the alternative markets to raise long-term capital for the SMEs, who are a very important part of achieving the SDG goals. So that's for the capital markets. Somebody mentioned the private sector. Yes, it's both of us, the government and the private sector. So then we have the PPP concept, the public-private partnership concept, which has taken some time to come to fruition. But I'm glad to say that there's a bill in front of Parliament now, so it's pending a pass that will move us from the case of having just a policy to actually having a law to govern public-private partnerships. This gives private investors more comfort that when they enter into any ventures with the public sector, they are protected, or their investment is protected. So that, again, we expect to see some major inflows there into the power sector, into the water sector, and hopefully also into the sanitation sector. The other area is social intervention programs to ensure that our growth and development is broad-based and that no one is left behind. We are also vigorously implementing a number of social protection programs in health, education, and SME development again. And I did hear one panelist talk about environment and making sure that people are well, even within our development. So we have a policy direction, because that is what we do as a ministry, give policy direction on refocusing the statutory, or what we call the earmarked funds, to sustain the SDGs, to support the redistribution of income. So all these measures are to ensure an all-inclusive growth which is a critical part of the development agenda. I've already talked about the extended credit facility program with the IMF, which is doing well and has brought in some funds towards balance of payments and helped the Ghana cedi to stabilize to a large extent. In fact, we're expecting to get some amount of budget support as well. I have to say that the development partners have stepped up over the last 18 months and made some significant contributions. We are glad to see that they've done that. But what is important, and I think all of us should think about it, is that when Ghana became a lower middle income country, it also now became a slightly different animal from most of the other African countries who are either low income or have moved ahead of us. It meant that now that we didn't have enough grants and concessional facilities, and that we needed more commercial facilities to develop our infrastructure, we needed another type of financing. In the corporate world, they do have the mezzanine financing, which is partly equity, partly loan. Ghana now needs that transition financing, because we are now a transition country. We are in transition. We are like a teenager now becoming an adult. You don't know what to do with your hands, your long legs, and all that. But you still need to grow. You need to become that useful adult. That transition financing is one that we've been discussing with the African Development Bank, with the World Bank and so forth, to consider, because to keep us in the old box, not restrict us, but that would allow us to grow, and to grow our state-owned enterprises and all the others in an efficient way to grow the whole economy. So I think that's one thing that I would like everyone to take away from here today, that in terms of domestic resource mobilization and even external financing, how do we structure that financing so that it helps our economy at the stage at which we are at? We can't take any more commercial loans. Our debt to GDP is almost 72, 73%. Clearly we can't do that. Development partners are still wondering what we are up to, even though we have proved ourselves, but at least they've stepped up. So what kind of financing do we need to continue to grow our economy? And that is one that is targeted towards a transition country, and that is what we are now. So I hope that today we can all think of some of those terms that will make it possible to, one, achieve our transformation agenda, which is within our national agenda, to achieve the Abuja 2063, which is the AU agenda, and then of course to fall in line with the SDGs as well, which are clearly part of our agenda. So we are looking at prioritizing, we are looking at sequencing, and we are looking at coordinating. There's no doubt that M&E, monitoring and evaluation, which has been a catchphrase all this time, will now become real and important, that we monitor and evaluate what we do so that we can grow on it. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Sustainable development goals are the task, are the duty that is given to us and that ask us to provide what is needed to reach these goals. When I was asked to participate in this event, as normal, I was a bit reluctant because I have to be selective. But when I saw what it was all about, on the one hand, the Sustainable Development Goals, and for my part, about honoring an educationalist, I quickly agreed. And I said, well, that's worth it. And before going to the citation of the laureate, let me share some thoughts about education. We have been talking about jobs. We heard the prof talking about companies that come here with skilled labor to exploit your natural resources. He has alluded to people at Circle who used the gutters for something it was not meant for when it was built. And again, we have heard about jobs and we have heard about financing of the private sector, of public-private partnerships, and so on and so forth. Now, how do we go about these problems? What really is the core of these problems? And let me use an expression that the world has only figured out some years back. What is the Higgs boson part of the problem? Where does it start? My opinion is clear. It's the absence of education. You can do whatever you want. If you don't do it with educated people, you will never, ever succeed. It's impossible. And these companies from abroad will come in to wherever these natural resources are and exploit them with their trained and skilled staff and export profits abroad. Well, you have an option. You cannot allow these companies to come. Then you don't exploit at all. And luckily for Switzerland, I must say, and allow me to use this as an example, we do not have natural resources. No oil, no gas, no gold, no bauxite, no whatever you want. We have a little bit of water that we share with our neighbors. We have to, because that's where it goes. But what we have built over time, is a population that is very educated, that allows us to be the biggest trading platform in the world for natural resources. Again, you might say, well, it's unfair to us. We have the resources and you make the money. Well, it's a choice. It's a choice. Educate your people. Bring them up to speed so they can participate in a globalized world. They can be an actor, and they can make sure that the profits stay where you want them to stay, in your countries. That's fair. That's fair. But to do that, you have to make an effort. You have to make an investment. And I strongly believe, much of the issues we are looking at have to do with education and can only be solved when you have an educated population. And I'm not talking exclusively about tertiary education, about university degrees and diplomas, which everybody wants to have, as many as possible, as cheap as possible also. I'm talking about the schools, first and foremost, basic education, secondary education, colleges, professional colleges, technical colleges, and only then universities. It might surprise you when I tell you that only 25% of the citizens in Switzerland have an academic degree. Well, how do we do that? An economy with a GDP of 600 billion a year, with just a few academics, who is generating this income? Well, I tell you, it's a skilled professional that does not have necessarily an academic degree. So you do not need an academic degree to be a valuable member of society. But they have to be educated. The mason, the mechanic, the painter, the bank clerk, whoever you need in a company to provide and generate, sell, has to be educated. And they don't come from the sky. You have to do it yourself. The teachers, first degrees, secondary degrees, technical schools, institutions, universities, but also the coaches in the sports clubs. They also educate the young. And I also include all those companies who educate their staff. All those companies who have a model that allows young people to grow through education. And the parents that play an important part. And everybody in society that fulfills his or her role in educating the young. Thank you for your attention.
Relating education to Ghana gives me great joy. When we look at the Human Development Index, reflecting on this and applying this to Ghana alone, the literacy rate in the country has improved significantly from the 36% at the time of independence to between 75 and 80 as we speak now. Much as this tells a very successful story, the negative and sad aspect of this otherwise interesting story is the other side of it. There are 4 regions out of the 10 in Ghana depicted as the poorest in the country. And incidentally, poorest because also the least literate, and these are Upper East, Upper West, Northern region, and to your surprise, Central region. These are the least literate regions within the country, but also because of that, the poorest in that same sequence. And what I did further studies on this, and was at one point about 5 years ago, doing a study of the rejected ballots during elections, tracing the journey from 92 to 96 to 2000, 2004, 2008, to the same sequence. The most rejected ballots